good morning everyone. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my first ever book recommendations video. I thought that it'd be really fun to go over some of the books that I think you should read this summer, even though I am filming this a little late in the summer, but we're not going to talk about that because summer reading can go as long as you want. Some books that I want you to read this summer, and then also some books on my priority summer TBR. And with all that being said, let's get right into it. I have a couple different categories. Like I said, I am going to try and kind of break it up into more subgenres or difference between fantasy and romance. I don't have too many fantasies. I do have a lot of romance and literary fiction. I think I'm going to start off with the fantasy just because I don't have as many recs for kind of summary fantasy. I honestly think that you can read all genres at all times of the year. I just think that these, when I thought of fantasies that kind of give warmer vibes compared to some fantasies that are like Fourth Wing, for example, that is not a very, it doesn't give summer vibes. And I think these ones could potentially give off summer vibes, so that's why they're in this list. Anyway, I'm actually going to get into them now. And the first book on my list for fantasy books is The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. This book I read earlier this year in February, and I don't regret reading it in the winter, but this book, I believe this whole series takes place in a kingdom that is very coastal. It's very humid. It's a jungle, basically. And for that reason, I think that you could read this in the summer and it feel very summery. It's also not a very heavy fantasy. Fantasy books I find can be very heavy on the world building, and a lot of times it is like a very dark situation. If you haven't heard me talk about this book already, in this book you're following Laura and Aaron. Laura has been trained to be an assassin and spy basically in the desert because one of her sisters will be picked when the time comes to be Aaron's wife for a kingdom as like an alliance for a treaty that they have formed. And Lara's job in being a spy is to take down Aaron's kingdom from the inside. Aaron is in charge of the Bridge Kingdom. The Bridge Kingdom is the kingdom that's in charge of the bridge, which is where the most trade and resources go through. Therefore, whoever has control of over the bridge has the most money, the most resources, and Lara's dad really wants the bridge. And I'm not going to tell you too much more. I did enjoy this book. I loved book 2 even more. Like, I look back on this book more fondly after finishing book 2 in this series, and I really, really recommend it. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, the vibes are very humid. Like, they're on the water, they're on ships. I don't know. To me, this book really feels like summer, and I'm probably going to say that sentence a lot. So just buckle up and deal with it. Okay, book 2 I have on my list I actually read recently as well, and that is Wicked Sea by Jordan Stephanie Gray. This book is so summer, it's crazy. In this book, you're following Zephyra, who is a mermaid in a society that actually despises mermaids and relishes in their death, and Zephyra gets caught. At the same time, there is a warlock, his name is Arian, and he is dying, and he needs to find this relic, basically this myth that's going to keep him alive. And he finds a little nugget of information in Zephyra right before she's set to be executed, and he makes the very rash decision to rescue her before her head is removed from her shoulders. And you kind of follow it from there. They're enemies. Arian works for the king that sets all the execution, who sets the laws that mermaids are evil. And there's so much tension in this book. And like I said, similar to the Bridge Kingdom, they're on ships, they're in the ocean, they're swimming, and it's just, Oh, I really, really loved this book. It was very, very good, and I highly recommend it to you guys. Okay, last of my fantasy books. This is my favorite book of the year so far, guys, and that is A Dance of Lies by Brittany Arena. This book is hands down, like I just said, the best book that I have read this year. We are in July, and nothing has topped this book for me. In this book, you're following Vasily, who had been imprisoned for 2 years for a crime that she hadn't committed, and the king pulls her out of jail and asks her to become the professional dancer that she once was and become a spy and infiltrate a royal gathering that's coming up. Except because of the time that she spent in jail, she experienced a lot of nerve damage and bone and muscle deterioration. So she's facing a lot more challenges than she had when she previously was the king's crowned dancer, basically. When she infiltrates the royal gathering, she meets so many people, and the dance element of this book was just it was just perfect. And as a dancer, I just love it. There is an incredible disability representation in this book, and book 2 is actually coming out very soon. So please read this book before book 2 so that you can read them so close together, because I just know you're going to love it. This book is some of the most beautiful writing that I have ever been able to experience on this earth. And there's a reason why it's my favorite book of the year. So please, please, please pick this book up. Okay, and with that rounds out my fantasy books that I have for you guys. Like I said, there wasn't very many. But now we can move on to the books that I read last summer or during the summers, or just that I've read and that I want you guys to read, that I think should be on the priority of your summer TBR. And we'll start with this book I actually read on audio. So I actually highly recommend the audiobook as well. I think it was very well done. But this will start off the more kind of small town cowboy side of my romance recs to you guys. And the first book is Bourbon and Lies by Victoria Wilder. This book was such an unexpected find for me. Like, I was working in the office and I just wanted an audiobook, and this was like the first one on the page, and I was like, why not? And it was a 5-star for me. A lot of these romance books are also going to be 5 stars for me. I really hold these summer books as like a small place in my heart for 5 stars that I remember previous summers by the books that I read, and this is one of them. In this book, you're following Lainey. She had just fled the life that she had known her whole life, and she has been brought to her, the middle of nowhere. I believe it's in Kentucky, but there she's basically hiding from what's happened back at home. She needs to be kept safe. She's basically in witness protection kind of thing. So she's smuggled out of the city and dropped into this town, and she's staying on this estate, this bourbon estate with the Bourbon brothers. And one of the brothers is named Grant, and Grant kind of takes like a liking to her, but it's kind of like this mystery almost, where it's like, why is she here? Like, she was dumped on their front porch in the middle of the night and told them to take care of her, and you don't really know what's happening until the very end. But Lainey and Grant take a liking to each other, and it was so good. I really, really recommend it. I really loved this book. Okay, next cowboy book that I read, I actually read a couple years ago. This isn't a new release, but it's still a book that I think really screams summer, and that is Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. This is a very short romance book. It's light, it's fluffy, and I really think that those are the kinds of books that are great to read during the summer. And in this book, you're following Emmy Ryder. I think she's also, let me actually just read the back of this book so I can talk to you guys about it. In this book, you're following Emmy Ryder, who has recently come home from the city because her life's kind of fallen apart, and so she comes back home. While she's back home, there is her brother's best friend who'd kind of been off limits before. He's a bad boy. I think he kind of sleeps around as well. But when she comes home, they kind of find this connection with each other that they hadn't ever given a chance to or explored before. This was actually the only book in this series that I liked, but that's just me. Other people have really liked other books in this series, okay? I think it's just a me problem. I read this one, books 2 and 3, and then I gave up on book 4 because I didn't see very good reviews about it. But I think this whole series you could read in the summer. They're all fast, they're all light, and what's not to love? Okay, next book is Holding the Reins by Paisley Hope. This book was a very unexpected 5-star for me last summer. This book was so perfect. Like everything about summer, everything about a summer romance, everything about a cowboy romance in this book was just so perfect. And I actually recently reread this and I still really love it. In this book, you're following Cece. There's actually a very common theme, I guess, with summer cowboy romances where her life has kind of blown up. Back in the city where she lived, she finds out her fiance's cheated on her and she leaves him and goes back home. And while she's back home, she ends up taking a job for her brother's best friend once again. He actually isn't a cowboy, he's a retired professional hockey player, but his name is Nash, and they start working together. And it kind of starts as just like this tension building, and he's obsessed with her. And then I think there's really good jealousy in this book. Jealousy done well. It's not like scary jealousy. It's just like it really makes the tension grow. And then finally, when it breaks, it's just like it was so good, and I really loved it, and I really loved the first 3 books in this series. This is the Silver Pine series. I don't really know about books 4 and 5. Those were not my favorite. I highly recommend books 1, 2, and 3 in this series, but the whole series is out. It's completed. You could read all of them. They're super fast-paced. The writing is super big. I was laughing. I really enjoy the characters in this book, and I think you really should pick it up. Okay, while we're kind of talking about sports with Nash, this one is kind of my outlier where it's a sports romance, not a cowboy romance, but we're going to circle back to one more cowboy romance after this. But I have Collide by Bel Cabra. This book, I read it during the summer and I loved it so much. It at the time was a 5-star read for me. I think I want to reread it because this book got me out of a reading slump, which I think is also great for the summer. I think a lot of people kind of fall into reading slumps when they just don't know what they want to read, which is what I was in. And then I found this book and reading slump was cured. In this book, you're following Summer, and she is a psychology student, and she has like sworn off hockey players. She's sworn off, I think, any kind of sports related boys, but hockey players specifically. And then there's Aiden, and Aiden is a hockey player, and they end up having to work together, I believe, on a project or something. I just remember really liking this book. It was really cute. It was really great. I think that you should read the whole series. I loved books 1 and 3. Book 2 wasn't my favorite, but it is what it is. Book 3 was a 5-star for me as well. I read that book earlier this year, and that 5-star came out of nowhere. I was so happy with reading that book. It was absolutely incredible. It's called Revolve. I honestly love Revolve more than this one, but I wanted to hold this one because this one is the first book in the series, and this might be a little more recognizable. Book 4 is Embrace, and I believe it's coming out in August, so rest assured I will be picking that up on release date, and I will be reading it right away, but this is my only kind of solely sports romance rec on this list. Okay, my final cowboy romance for this video is Wyatt by Jessica Peterson. I didn't know if I was going to give this book a chance, to be honest, because I started Cash, book 1 in the series, and I DNF'd that book. So I didn't really know if it was something about the writing or if maybe that author just wasn't for me. Thank goodness I picked the series back up because this book was nearly a 5-star for me. Like, this was a 4.75. This book was so good. You're following Sally and Wyatt, and they've been best friends for a long time. And honestly, guys, if you know anything about me, friends to lovers is like probably bottom tier trope for me. I don't really love friends to lovers. I find it a very frustrating trope a lot of the time. I think that it can be done badly, a lot of the time because I think it can be very tied to miscommunication. And this book, I was worried about it a little bit, and then absolutely none of my fears came true. This is a friends to lovers done right. They communicate with each other, they tell each other what's happening, and when that happens, they talk about it. Like, that's what I want from a friends to lovers romance, is that when these feelings come up, that they talk about it with each other and they just come out with it instead of just harboring these feelings until the very end. They start out being friends and then they're kind of friends with benefits and then friends to lovers, which I think also kind of helped the progression from the friends to lovers because they had the friends with benefits. But the tension was really good and I really, really loved this book. I highly recommend it. Okay, now I have 3 books that kind of don't fall into like sports or cowboys or anything. These are more miscellaneous ones. And these were like my top books from last year. These 3 books, my top books from last summer. One of them was, I think, my favorite book of that I read all summer last year. To start off that category, we have Sounds Like Love by Ashley Poston. This was one of the book club books that I read last year, and this was my first Ashley Poston book, and it was a 5-star, honestly a 6-star, that really like snuck up on me. Like, I went into this book kind of being a little hesitant. I'd never read any romance mixed with magical realism before, and I didn't really know what to expect with it. But this book was so beautifully written. I read a couple of Ashley Poston's books now, and that is just the expectation. She sets the bar for beautiful writing so high, and she also tackles some really kind of hard topics very beautifully and very respectfully. There is a theme of grief in the books that I have read of hers. Her books are very female main character forward, which I've come to really love when it is very centered on her journey. I really love Ashley Poston's writing and I would recommend any of her books because of that. But this book I read last summer. You're following Joni, and she is a songwriter, and she's had these big hits, but she's kind of in this writer's block. She can't write anything, and she goes to her friend's concert, and there's this kiss cam. And why is there a kiss cam at a concert? Guys, don't ask questions, okay? Just read the book. Just read the book. She ends up kissing this guy, and it's like this magical, wonderful, like incredible kiss. Like, she was not expecting chemistry to happen in that one kiss. And then they leave the concert and she never sees them again. But then something happens and she has to go back home, and she has this melody in her head that she can't get out. It's this melody and it follows her wherever, and she can't place it and she can't grasp onto it enough to like kind of do anything with it song wise. And then all of a sudden, there's a voice in her head, and she's kind of like, am I going insane? There is this guy talking to me in my head. And you find out that it's actually the guy that she kissed at the concert, this like famous, I think he's a rock star or something to that effect, or maybe he's an actor. His voice is in her head and her voice is in his head. So he ends up coming to her small town, and they're trying to figure out how that they can stop this, like how they can get each other's voices out of their head. And a really beautiful friendship and romance stems from that. I really, really loved this book. It was just, like I said, it snuck up on me. I didn't expect to love it quite as much as I did, but the vibes, the romance, the writing, everything was just top tier for this book, and I really, really think that you should pick this up. Okay, next was my favorite book that I read last year, and that was One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. This was my first Carly Fortune book, and the cover itself is just screaming summer. Like, come on, guys. And I read this book at my cottage, and that was the perfect setting to read this book. Carly Fortune's writing is so unbelievably atmospheric. Like, she can pluck you out of wherever you are in the world and dump you right on the side of the lake with the sun shining on you. And oh, it was just so well done. This is another book where you're following the female main character who's kind of lost her place in life. She's struggling with a lot of things at work, and she finds out that her grandma needs her help after having a really intense surgery. And she's like, why don't we go down to the cottage that we all loved when we were younger? And so she goes down with her grandma, and that's where she meets Charlie. He's such a lighthearted soul, and him and Alice kind of spark up this friendship where they just start hanging out with each other. And Charlie kind of brings Alice back to life, and it was so beautiful to watch. I tabbed the crap out of this book. It was like, I couldn't get enough of it. It was so atmospheric, so beautifully written, and I loved the story. I loved following Alice, kind of find her confidence again, and also just find other relationships with people. Like, yes, this is a romance, but she also found friends, and she also healed a lot, and a lot happens in this book. And I know that you've probably seen this as a summer romance rec a lot. There's a reason, okay? There is a reason why this book is recommended so highly, and it is because it's perfect, okay? It's perfect to me. So it's going to be perfect to you. So just pick it up, okay? So my last book of my 5 stars from last summer that I'm carrying over that I think you should read is Beg, Borrow, Steal by Sarah Adams. This book, I don't know why I picked it up. It's book 3 in a series. I think I saw it on the shelf, and I just picked it up because I was never seen the cover before. And page one, I was already laughing. Page 1 is that far into the book. You literally have the title page, and then that's where you are. I read this little email thread and was already laughing so hard, which if a book manages to make me laugh, it is already going to have a very high rating, because I love books that make me laugh. I love books that bring me joy. And this book is such older sister coded, which I am an older sister, and I felt so seen in reading this book and what the kind of female main character was going through and how she was kind of dealing with her own problems, which she wasn't dealing with them because other people always had other problems that she was prioritizing over herself. And I think that's just so big sister coded. And this book is so well done. I loved it. It was so unexpected, but this also got me out of a reading slump. I'd read some garbage books before I read this one, and this book really brought me back to life and really showed me what great writing and what a great story can do. Okay, in this book, you're following Emily, and Emily is in the small town. She's the big sister. Her sisters are all there, and she's kind of lost a little bit, and she's an aspiring writer, and she accidentally sends the entire manuscript of a book that she's written to the school's principal at the school that she works at. And previously, there had been this teacher there that she kind of had this animosity with, but not bad animosity. They just really made fun of each other, and that was Jack. But Jack left town. He was getting married, and he just up and left. He just disappeared. And all of a sudden, he comes back in town, and Emily is kind of why are you back? And they have this incredible banter and tension and the animosity where they just kind of make fun of each other and poke fun at one another. And he ends up helping her try and get the email deleted off of the principal's computer. So you're kind of following them as that happens. And oh my God, so good. I want to reread this book this summer just talking about it. And I loved it so much. Once again, incredible writing, incredible story, incredible tension, banter, romance, everything. And this book personally just made me feel really seen, which is why I love it so much, because it is so relatable. And I think it was just so comforting as a big sister. And I really, really think that you should pick this book up. Okay, that kind of wraps up my romance recs to you guys of books that I have already read, but now I have a couple literary fiction novels that I want to talk to you about. The first book is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans, and this book is a collection of letters of correspondence between our female main character, Sybil Van Antwerp, and so many other people, family members, neighbors, strangers. This book was so well done. I thought that I would like it. I obviously bought it, and I wanted to give it a shot. I'd never read anything like this in my life, and I underestimated how attached I could get to characters solely from letters. Like, I was expecting to like it, but I was not expecting to cry. And this book brought every emotion out of me. I was laughing, I was crying, I was mad, like absolutely everything. And it was from letters. And it was just so beautiful. And you kind of follow Sybil as she kind of deals with stuff from her past that she's really been repressing. And you also kind of follow her as she does new things. Sybil is an older woman. I believe she's in her 80s. And I'm not going to tell you everything that happens in this book because I really think a lot of the emotion comes from going into it blind. But I think that Sybil is such a courageous female main character, and it was so refreshing to read a character who'd already experienced so much and knew who she was and was reflecting on such diverse memories. Like, it was good memories, bad memories, and really coming to terms with stuff that was happening in her life or that had happened in her life. And it's short, it's sweet, but it packs a punch. And I really think that you should pick this up. You can pick this up at any time, but this book does have very kind of coastal vibes. And she writes her letters while looking out the window at the ocean with boats sailing, with her garden beds blooming under her. And it's just so light despite some of the heavier topics in this book. So I really think that you should pick this up. This was a 5-star for me recently. Okay, next book on this list that I have is Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke. This book was a very intriguing concept. You're following Natalie, who's a trad wife in our current time, and then she gets thrown back into the 1800s and actually has to kind of live the life that she's glorifying on the internet. A lot of people have said that Natalie is a horrible and annoying female main character, which I think that's part of it. Like, I personally share absolutely none of the views, especially religiously, with Natalie. And I went into it with a very comedic view because I just found it so entertaining watching like her thought process and how she dealt with things, and also the social media aspect of it all. I think a lot of this book was very hypocritical, how Natalie hates feminism but also is a trad wife on the internet, and previously she would not have been able to have that opportunity without the progression of feminism and the role of women in society. So, like, it's that kind of thing. It talks about religion, it talks about postpartum, it talks about social media, it talks about so much in such an interesting way. I really loved it. I was so addicted to it. Like, it was funny and it was just it was incredible. I loved it. I had no idea what was going on. I'm not going to tell you really any more about this book because going in blind is the way to go. The information that I just told you is the information that I went into it with. Nothing about, I didn't know, I guess, about the topics that it talked about, but I knew the social media thing about her being a trad wife, and I just really, really liked it. And I didn't know exactly how the ending was going to kind of unfold, but I really like how it ended. I think had the author gone a different note, it wouldn't have been a 5-star, but because she did go that way with the ending, it was a 5-star. And this book was just, it was great. I really loved it. I didn't know what was happening, and it just kept me on the edge of my toes, and I was always interested at the end of every chapter. I was like, what on earth is going on? And I think it was just an incredible book, and I really, really, really want you to read it. Okay, final book on the books that I have already read, and that is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is another 5-star that I've had from this year, and this book, it was so heartwarming and heartbreaking at the exact same time. I don't know how Taylor Jenkins Reid managed to do that in a story, but you're following Joan, and Joan is an astronomy teacher. I believe it's the 1980s, and NASA has finally opened up the opportunity to be an astronaut to women, and Joan applies, and she eventually gets accepted after being denied the first time. That's really all I want you to go into this with. This book had some of the best found family that I'd ever read in my whole life. You're following two timelines, one when she just enters NASA, and the second when she's been with NASA and it's been a few years and she's gone through the training and they're actually starting to put their training to use. And it was just so beautiful and heartbreaking, and I loved it. This book had me crying, it had me laughing, and it just really plays with your heartstrings, and it was so beautiful. This book, similar to Yesteryear in a way that it has some really unlikable characters in it. Like, those characters are unlikable for a reason and for a purpose, and as annoying as it is to kind of be in those scenes with them, it does move the plot forward. It was really great, and I think if you're able to look at it at those characters with an appreciative lens, you'll understand why they kind of were the way that they were, and also at the end how that works out for Joan and her relationships with them. And that's all I'm going to say about this book. This book, I talked at great length about this in my 3-month reading wrap up, as well as my reading Book Early's 5-star reads in Sarah Crowley. This was a Sarah Crowley recommendation that I got, and I absolutely loved it. And now I am recommending it to you guys. Okay, now we're moving on to the part of the video where I talk about books that I have not read yet and that are on my TBR for the summer. I know logically that I'm not going to be able to read all of these this summer, and thank goodness summer comes every year, so I'm going to have a long time to read these. But I have books that have already come out that I want to read in the summer, and then I have new releases that I'm going to read or I want to read in the summer. We're going to start with the books that have already come out. On the top of that list is The Names by Florence Knapp. This book, initially, when I kind of read the premise of it, I hadn't quite gotten into the literary fiction yet, and it didn't quite intrigue me as much as it intrigues me now. Basically, you're following this mom who just gave birth to her son, and there's this tradition where the son gets named after the father, except the father isn't a great person. She's dealing with the heavy decision of whether or not she wants to name her son the same name as horrible people before him. And you're following 3 different timelines of what the son grows to be with the different names, or something to that effect. I don't really know. Like I said, I haven't read it, and this book does really intrigue me, so I am really looking forward to reading this. I really love the cover, and it's short and sweet, and I don't know, I think it'll be a great book, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. Okay, next book on the list, we have Promise Me Sunshine by Cara Bastone. This book I kind of picked up randomly at the bookstore one day, and I was like, what's this book about? And it's about this woman whose best friend recently died, and she kind of is lost in life. She doesn't really know what to do, and so she takes up this nannying job. I believe she kind of strikes up a friendship with his uncle, who is dealing with his own issues and is trying to build a relationship with his nephew, but doesn't really know how. So she kind of helps him with that, and they kind of develop a friendship through that. This book also deals with the topic of grief, and I've heard really great reviews about it. I haven't heard a single bad thing, and the cover is just summery. This is Promise Me Sunshine. I think the concept is going to be really good. I think that this is going to be a very well-written novel, and I'm just really looking forward to reading it. I'm really hoping to pick this book up in the near future. Okay, next we have Daddy Issues by Kate Goldbeck. This book, another instance where the female main character is kind of lost in life and is having to move back home and live with her mom, and she kind of is in this rut of like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I think she's in her late 20s, and she's like, I'm still living at home, and she's kind of had to restart everything. And then I believe it's her neighbor who's a single dad, and I think they kind of strike up some sort of friendship that then turns into a romance of sorts. And from what I've heard, this does focus a lot on the female main character, which, like I've said, is something that I really, really enjoy in a romance book. And I haven't ever read a book by Kate Goldbeck, but the cover really intrigued me. The kind of like snapshots through the window, like you're looking at the characters at where they start and then kind of where they end up. I really liked it, and I was like, why not? I want to read it eventually. So this was another book that I have on my TBR for the summer. Next, we have Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. This book, I don't know where Annabelle Monaghan popped out of nowhere, because it felt like that to me. And all of a sudden, everybody was reading and recommending her books. And I was like, where did she come from? She's kind of similar to Carly Fortune and Ashley Poston, where like the writing is very beautiful and it's very female main character centered. And in case you haven't picked up on the pattern, but that's a combination that I absolutely love. And I don't really know too much about this. I think she might be a single mom. Okay, I actually don't have any idea what this book's about. I really just know what I just told you. And I love going into books blind, so this is just another book that I've heard that is perfect to read during the summer. And I don't know if I'm going to pick this up this summer necessarily, but it will be read sometime in the summer. Maybe I will pick it up. Who knows? Okay, and now we have The Wedding People by Alison Espach. Espach? I don't know how to read it, but this book I have heard really good things about. I believe it follows a female main character that's really struggling in life. It says, a propulsive and uncommonly wise novel about one unexpected wedding guest and the surprising people who help her start anew. And I think you're following a female main character who goes to this island and she's really in a dark place, and she meets the bride. Nobody else is supposed to be there because I think the island is being used and the venue is being used for her wedding. I think they start a very unexpected friendship between the two of them. I think this book does deal with some heavier topics, especially with mental health. This book has just really been catching my eye recently, and I really want to finally get to it. I think this is going to be on the top of my TBR coming up, and I'm just really excited to read it. I've heard really good things about it, and I just also really like the cover, so that always helps when picking up a book. And so this is also on my priority summer TBR. Okay, next we have The Burning Side by Sarah DeMoff. This is an author that I've never read anything for before, and I've heard nothing but great things. I've heard that this book kind of like rips your heart out, crushes it, and then gives it back to you, and you're kind of just left to deal with the consequences of reading this book. And sometimes you kind of like being emotionally devastated, and I think that's what happens in this book. I don't really know too much about it. I'm pretty sure from what I remember of this book, our main character's marriage is kind of on the rocks or having some problems communicating with each other, and it's just not working like it once did. And in the middle of the night, their house goes up in flames, and she ends up having to take her and her family to live with her parents. I think it just goes from there. I don't really know too much else. I know that this book brings tears and devastation, but also a heartwarming story, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. I think that this cover is beautiful, and I think the concept is going to be really interesting to explore, so I can't wait to get to this book. Okay, last book on the books that I've already owned that are not new releases is Almost Life by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. This book is a sapphic romance. I believe it happens in like the 1960s, and you're following these characters. One of them lives in Paris and one of them is a tourist, and she kind of has this rule that like don't get attached to tourists because they're not permanent. They just come and they go. And they kind of have this tension building between them where they meet at certain points in their life, and there's always this like what if sense. There's a line in the synopsis that really made me buy the book. They will experience heart-wrenching losses, dreams realized and crushed, and other great loves and heartbreaks. Each time they meet, they will be faced with the same choice, their love or another life. And that line in and of itself sold me on this book. This book has been on my TBR for a while now, and I really, really want to finally get to it this summer. I think that it would be just a really good romance, and actually, I don't know if it's a romance. This might be more lit fic than romance, but I've never read anything by this author, and I love giving authors a new chance, so I'm very excited to finally get to this book. Okay. final stack of books, guys. We're in the home stretch, but this is the stack of books that are new releases that have come out recently or this year in general that I really want to prioritize, because I have this issue where new books come out and I know that I want to read them and I buy them and then they sit there and I'm like, why do I do that? I need to actually get better at reading the books when they come out. So this is my stack of books dedicated to my efforts to finally do that. And top on the list is The Someday Garden by Ashley Boston. You already heard me talk great lengths about why I love Ashley Boston's writing, so I'm going to try and keep it short, but I don't really ever do that. I always say things in a lot of words, unfortunately, but this is her most recent release. I was happy enough to be able to grab a signed copy of it, which is very exciting because she is one of my favorite authors. And in this book, you're following our main character. Once again, there's this theme of grief happening. In this book, you're following Sophie. Sophie is a horticulturalist who's working at this inn, and she's in charge of taking care and maintaining and fixing up the gardens that have become overgrown with a lack of maintenance in time for the party at the end of the summer. And while she's doing that, she finds this hidden door, and behind it is a whole other secret garden, and there's this man in it. I don't really know what else is happening in this book beyond that. I just know that I love Ashley Boston, and that concept just sounds so magical and beautiful, and I just know that it's going to bring the right summer vibes that I want. So I'm very excited to get into this book. Next, we have Fever Dream by Elsie Silver. This is her newest release, and this is the book one in her Emerald Lake series. In this, you're following Julia, who is a kind of behind the scenes worker on a reality TV show, and then you're following Emmett, who is the star of the reality TV show, and he's trying to find love. I say that in air quotes because he is taking this job because his ranch needs the money and they are filming the TV show on his ranch. So he's not going into it with the intention to find love. He's just doing it for the money. And then him and Julia kind of sparked this kind of friendship between each other. I don't really know what else. That's about all I know. And that's all I'm going to go into it with. But I've heard great things about this book and I'm really excited to finally get to it. I'm hoping to get to it soon. So maybe you'll see that in a video coming up. I love Elsie Silver's writing, and I'm really excited to get to it. Okay, another author that I really love, her books are actually right here, right behind me, and that is Chelsea Curto. This is her kind of storm chaser. The movie Twister, it came out with Glenn Powell. I think that was set to kind of inspire Chelsea to write this book, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know anything about this book. I'm pretty sure they're both... Yeah, I don't know, guys. I'm sorry. I don't really have anything. I just know that it's inspired by Twisters, and the cover is great. I've heard absolutely nothing but great reviews about this book, and I saw one of my favorite book people saying that it dethroned Maverick Miller, who is another favorite male main character of mine, and I'm interested to see if this male main character does dethrone Maverick Miller, because Maverick Miller is like top tier when it comes to male main characters. So I'm very excited to get to this book, and hopefully I will be picking this up very, very soon. Next book we have is Main Characters by Bobby Palmer. This book is a very interesting concept for a romance novel because you're following everybody else in the world watch our main characters fall in love. You're following like the barista who's making their coffee. You're following the person sitting beside them on the bus. You're following their coworkers. You're following everybody who's like watching them fall in love and their relationship blossom, but you're not actually following them and able to know what they're thinking. And I just thought that that is such an incredible concept for a book. I've heard, once again, nothing but great things about this book so far. It came out recently and I am just really excited to go into it. It's a really interesting premise and kind of concept for a book, and I'm really interested to see how it all plays out because you're not actually able to like hear what the characters think of each other. So I'm interested to see how that kind of plays out, how we're able to still see that without being able to be in their heads. So very excited about this book. Next, we have The Shampoo Effect by Jenny Jackson. This book, I really picked it up because I really like the cover of it, and also because I kind of like the premise of it. It's like a group of friends who just like enjoy their summers. It feels like a very like rich friend group where they have kids and they kind of just live their life with no responsibility, and then something happens in the friend group and it kind of turns our world upside down, and you kind of watch it all go from there. And I don't really know what else. I think this is going to be messy, and I think you're following like the four girls of the friend group, if I'm not mistaken. But I know nothing about this book other than what I just said, so I could be wrong. But the cover really sold me, the premise really sold me. It kind of is giving reality TV in a way, and like the messiness that it's going to be serving us. So, very excited to get to this one. And then this next book is Our Perfect Storm by Carly Fortune. This is her newest release of 2026, and like I said, I loved Ashley Poston's release last year, One Golden Summer, and she became an auto-buy author just for that book alone. So I am very, very excited to read this one. The only thing about this one is that it is friends to lovers, and like I said, I don't really love friends to lovers, but I'm willing to give it a chance because I love Carly's writing so much, and I really hope that she handles it in the way that I personally like it to be handled. I've heard really, really mixed reviews on this book so far, which is why I've really prolonged reading this, and I think it's time. I just need to bite the bullet and I need to read it, because if I'm going to love it, I want to know that I'm going to love it. I don't want to prolong it and then pick it up and be like, why didn't I read this sooner? So I'm really excited to get to this. Hopefully, I will be getting to it by the end of the summer. The writing is really big. It's just so beautiful. I love her covers. They're so colorful, and like the covers really portray, I think, the setting and the vibes of this book. And I guess I didn't tell you guys what this book's about. I think you're following Frankie. Yeah, you're following Frankie, and she was engaged to her fiance, and then she wakes up one morning and her fiance has left her a note saying that he can't marry her. And so her life kind of all falls apart. She moves back home, but then her best friend George comes in to save the day and says, hey, we're going on your honeymoon and we're actually going to fix your broken heart. And that's about all I know. I'm hoping that it's a really good book because I really love Carly's writing. Okay, and then another book that I kind of picked up solely because of the cover is Pool House by Mary H.K. Choi. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. This book, like I said, I picked it up because of the cover. I was really kind of intrigued about the blue. I just really like this cover. It's very simplistic, but it's also intriguing at the same time, and I believe you're following a mother and a daughter who I think were both in love with the same person who recently passed away, and I think they've had to move out of their home and use it for an Airbnb in order to generate money for them. And I think you're kind of just following them both coming to terms with their grief and their healing process, and also I think probably reconnecting because, like I said, both mother and daughter were in love with this man. I just thought that that was really cool. The cover really sold me, and I'm very excited to get to this book. Okay, guys, last book on the list is June Baby by Shannon Garvey. This book, I have heard that it's another very emotional, very sad romance book. I think this book also deals with the topic of grief, and I really don't know much about it. I recently saw Madison Kate read it, and she was sobbing her eyes out, and she was just talking about how beautiful this is written, despite how kind of sad the story is. And I thought, why not pick it up? Who doesn't like being sad in the summer? And I don't remember exactly what the premise was about. I think she always goes to this island during the summer, and that's where she spends her summers. And I don't really know really what else, but I know that it deals with grief, and I just wanted to read it. I've said that for every single book, basically, and they wouldn't be on this list if I didn't want to read them. So, this is the last book of today's video. That was a lot of talking on my part, guys. That was a lot. I really hope you guys take some of these book recommendations. I really hope that if you've read these books, you can comment down below and let me know if you've liked them and if you've loved them and what books you guys recommend. If you guys have any books that, after all of this, kind of getting my reading taste and hearing what I love about books, especially books that I read in the summer. If you have any book recommendations for me, please leave them down below. I would love to read them. I am obviously open to all genres, and I've really dipped my toes into literary fiction, and I'm very excited to get to some of these books. So with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope your next read is a 5-star. I will leave my Instagram up on the screen if you want to follow me there, and I will hopefully see you in the next video.